No matter how much we work as women, there seem to be these ceilings in terms of what we can own.
What would you say to that?
We cannot find things to back because no one wants to take the risk.
But where else do you go to find African founders? What spaces are you moving in to find these women?
We start with, where do we think is the biggest opportunity for women? Building a community of like-minded investors who can then say, hey, how do we create an ecosystem that works better for entrepreneurs to survive?
What metrics determine investability?
Bringing an idea to life and seeing it through, particularly in this market, is highly dependent on the team and the individual.
How will you know you have succeeded?
We're not there because everyone has had to struggle so much.
What do you think some of the underlying issues are that make it so difficult for women to access capital on the African continent?
That piece of capital is something we've not had the chance to really build in this market. Understand the market and design the parameters.
Welcome to the Doers Defined podcast, where our mission is to amplify the emerging market heroes who are bringing positive change. Today, I'm delighted to have a dear friend as our guest, Jo Opot. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we'll dive right in. And perhaps I should start by saying that we've actually known each other 20 years. While you were at Starting Block, I think you were living in New York.
Yes.
I was living in Boston. And I've always known you to light up every room that you walk into.
Thank
You've
you.
always been so dear to me. You're an incredible mother to Palisa and wife to Freeman. And you've always been so passionate about elevating the African woman. So with all that said, what is one thing that most people do not know about you?
I might point out two things. The first will be that to get this far, there is an incredible village that makes all the behind the scenes work happen. And I'm forever grateful for that. And I'd not be able to do anything all the way from my grandmother, who inspired my life and my choices, to my daughter, who holds me accountable, to my husband, who is like, go forth and soar. Whatever you need, you've got it. All the way to strangers who along the way have backed whatever idea I might be pitching, even when I was like, really? You're going to back that? But that piece is important for me because I think often at times people look at the individual accomplishments and there's this narrative of, with determination and focus and intelligence, you can do it on your own. Yet for me, my life has been, you can have all of those, but if you don't have that group, you're going nowhere. I think the second fun one is, I think I need to have sports in my life on a daily basis. Whether it's biking, whether it's running. My daughter chuckles that I'm the queen of multitasking because
You do it well.
I'm glad it works. But there's, if I go through a week and there's not been activity, things begin to fill off. Yeah. So that one is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you in terms of having a village. But I think you also you're a beautiful person. And so as a result, I think every person I've actually met through you, I've really loved. I think the classic one was being at Unga and you meet Linda and all I get are these beautiful pictures, right? So I think it's a testament to who you are. Yeah. So just really honored to just have you as a friend.
Thank you.
Yeah. But with all that said, you also, I want to say, a heavyweight. And
I'll take it. Yes.
And you lead a gender and climate smart fund, Gather Fund, which invests in ventures that create climate resilience and drive asset creation for women and girls in Africa.
Yes.
For as long as I've known you, Your mission has been to elevate women. What experiences led to this specific mission?
I think the first is knowing women in my family and beyond who have worked so hard. You get the education, you get the job, you find a partner, you build a life together, and then your partner passes away and it goes to his family. The other one is, you're a daughter, you've worked hard, you're actually the one who's taken care of your parents as they've grown older. But when the will is discussed, it goes to your brothers. And there's this tricky cultural part where no matter how much we work as women, no matter what we do, there seem to be these ceilings in terms of what we can own and what we can leverage and what we can move. And so that piece of what creates assets for women, if I could think of what do I want on, I don't know, as they speak to about my life after I've passed.
Yeah.
Having moved this needle and seen so many more women have assets, and they can be different kinds, would give me deep joy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can hear the passion. And actually the cultural context, you're right. We don't talk about it, but you are so right. No, that's a beautiful answer. So I'll move into, I guess, your career before. Many people might not know that you are at Acumen Fund. And at Acumen Fund, you are responsible for backing businesses and entrepreneurs that were innovatively tackling poverty. You were the head of business development in San Francisco, and then subsequently the head of leadership and strategy in Nairobi, Kenya. And I say this because there's been a long-standing debate about the role of impact investing in entrepreneurship. And some might say that impact investing actually crowds out profitable and sustainable businesses in our ecosystem. What would you say to that?
I think the context matters a lot. So I lived in New York for 6 years and built my first startup there. I lived in San Francisco for 5 years. And my role at Acumen during my time there with Acumen was really getting capital that would be backing these companies. There is an ecosystem where if you're a first-time entrepreneur in a developed market and you need capital, there is the family, friends, and full round. And you get really easy access capital. It could be the equivalent of grants. It could be in kind. But there is that money for you to really think about your idea and flesh it out. And then once you're ready for more traditional backers, that's the VC world, or even looking at bank rates, you've already had time to figure out your kinks. Now, in our market, we don't have that friends, family, and fools round.
Yeah.
You have more traditional investors who are looking at returns and saying, we cannot find things to back because no one wants to take the risk. No one wants to understand that if you're thinking about a tech company or a last mile distribution, it's not only about the product you're pitching, but you're thinking about infrastructure, you're thinking about building your team. And all those things have line items that a traditional investor will not look at. Now, there are some markets that are farther ahead in this journey. So if I think of India, they had their first really big startups, Infosys being one of them in the 80s.
Yes.
And through that, there was an entire generation of people who made a lot of money, who were in those markets. And then we're able to take that and invest in other local companies. But that piece of capital is something we've not had the chance to really build in this market. So even more traditional investors like, you impact guys are crowding it out. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but come in, take more risks and understand that it's a longer journey. Because the other side of it is then we end up with a market where impact investment is being looked down upon. But then when you go back to the investment committees, you then have people saying, oh man, all these locally led entities, but they're just not investor ready. Right?
Yeah. I'm laughing, because it's so true.
It's
so true.
They're not ready. Let's back the amazing expatriates who are coming in with ideas that are fully fleshed out. What they don't take the step to understand is those amazing expatriates had that first round before they walked into the investment room.
That is so great. So maybe let me follow it up with this. Then what's the role of impact investing in entrepreneurship for our ecosystems?
Yeah. First, I think it's highly critical. The dynamic around the problems we're trying to solve are not what is the best fitness app and how you're going to get a better latte this weekend or how do you we're still at a point where with thinking about agriculture, we're thinking about healthcare, we're thinking about education, and those challenges do need investors who are like, does this solution not only benefit a certain group of people who can pay for it because you're looking at your returns, but is this going to improve the whole of this nation? How do you find a solution that works for us, individuals who've made it and can afford it, but also the person who's living on less than $2 a day, which is a ledger. Now, that's the role of it's like, hold on, wait. Let's not only pick the ideas that seem highly lucrative because they exist here. There are many around the many tech solutions that could either go all the way from betting to anything else. There are many ways to make money off people. But then how do we build our economies requires that impact lens because the trade-off you're making has a long-term gain. Now, flip side, if you look at more developed markets, they had different ways to get there. In some cases, some got very lucrative opportunities to rebuild after big wars. In other cases, we go further back. Some of them had very cheap resources based on their colonies. Right?
True.
And that created intergenerational wealth where the starting point is completely different. So I think that piece, that impact money is needed was provided in different ways in other markets. And if we ignore it, we're not building a society. We're building short-term, high-return businesses. But long-term, we're going to have bigger problems.
Ooh, I hear you. No, excellent. Yeah. And I get the point that you're driving at. And I have to say that for the most part, I think because I've never really had an impact investing base, you do question. I think if you're not there, you're not in the room, but in many ways you need somebody to essentially take charge of some of the tougher issues that no one's going to invest in and are not lucrative. And I think that's what I took out specifically from that answer. So thank you. That was actually helpful for me.
and just to qualify it, because I feel like at times these conversations can remain in this constructs of this is what it feels like. So one of the companies in our portfolio focused on gender, run by incredible female Kenyan entrepreneur who has her PhD in biotechnology and microbiology, came back to Kenya after working in the US and wants to take cassava and convert it into bioethanol. Now, in the process of doing that, she's engaging smallholder female farmers. These smallholder female farmers are in a position to go from cassava is low value, cultivating a low value crop, to something that is now a fuel crop because it's going to be processed into bioethanol. In addition, she's building a refinery that will employ a different set of women in Kilifi, women who never thought of a job in a manufacturing plant.
Wow. Completely
new income level. And then there's this third piece of this bioethanol is going to cook stoves. So this question about the woman with the firewood on her head to feed the baby on her back. No, I have an update on that woman. That woman is now cultivating a crop that is going to give her clean fuel, and she can figure out her life. But further yet, what this company is thinking about is also what would it look like for that female farmer to have shares in this bioethanol business.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Now, this is, clean, green climate solutions, a circular economy by African women for African women. We're doing it ourselves.
Oh, that is beautiful.
But the thing is, to make it work, a traditional investor will be like, I want to see the refinery. I want to see the farm working. I can give you money for the farm. I can give you money for the refinery. You need some grant money that's going to get that female farmer to be cultivating better cassava. You need some grant money, actually significant amount, that will figure out all the legal that then maps out the shares and the employee stock loan program or the phantom shares that helps these women. You don't want that money to mess with the business operations.
Yeah.
And that's where impact investing can have a truly catalytic role.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's wealth in a situation that they could never dream of. But because you care about these women so much, the upside, what I'm getting is that you want to share. You're making a commitment to share some of that upside with the very people that allow you to ultimately succeed in that business. Incredible. And maybe I can note, because we do know this entrepreneur, Linda Davis, and I think it's important to say the name.
Absolutely.
Hear it, and that we're all behind championing what she's doing.
Absolutely.
And assisting her to succeed in this.
Yes.
So this allows me to dive well into, I think, the next question. Because you're a capital allocator. So Alinda, perhaps we might have known through the energy business, etc. She might be a little bit more visible. But where else do you go to find African founders? What spaces are you moving in to find these women entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So our focus is agriculture as the largest employer of women. Women really do around 70 to 80% of the production, if I use Kenya as a case study, yet earn 20% of the GDP. So that piece of how does agriculture, where you have a lot of women, have high returns for them. But agriculture is also decreasing in size as everything gets mechanized. So there's this challenge of a woman in agriculture now would have a very hard time 10 years from now. So we also look at construction and tech as the two fastest growing industries that have the fewest women. So in terms of where do we find these women, we start with where do we think is the biggest opportunity for women? Within that, we've done everything from, I have had team members show up at entrepreneurs' manufacturing hubs in the industrial area. The knock, knock, knock. Hello. We tried to email, we tried to call, and we could not get you. So we're here. We love what you're doing. We saw an extract of it somewhere. Could you please tell us more?
Wow.
Yeah. There's definitely building a community of like-minded investors who can then say, hey, you know what? this is not for us, but I think this would be great for you. And having you be top of mind in those situations. The other is the hard work. It's pipeline development. As you do pipeline development for fundraising, every week we sit down as a team, and the question is like, how many new leads have you found? Why is it hard to find them? Why is it easy? Where, and we're doing this. Which markets do you think? So there's both the leave no stone unturned, and then there's the rigor and the systems to consistently do it. Because what you find is a lot of the amazing entrepreneurs are so deep down in their work and trying to make it all happen that they will not necessarily be at the investor conference.
Yes.
And I think that's another tricky dynamic. You tend to notice that the ones who get there are the ones who are savvy, who've had international opportunities already.
Yes. Yeah. Know the importance of marketing yourself, storytelling. Yep.
And the flip side is it's also recognizing that it's a journey. So the patience of saying, I met with this entrepreneur today, and their idea seems so green or so far from where we are. They just need to keep going on. But may I check in on them? Wow. And also telling them, you're here. It seems like we don't have a connection right now, but please, 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 this is what I'm looking for. If you ever go in that direction, call me anytime. And I've had entrepreneurs 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later.
Wow.
And been blown away of like, oh my goodness, you got this far. Can we please figure out how to make this work?
That is beautiful because that's unconventional. And I think I keep emphasizing that is a reason we need more of us who understand, who grew up in this ecosystem. I think understand, because some of it is, I think, also a cultural mindset. You know, this belief that as long as you're executing or you're working hard, somebody will find you, you'll find the capital. But I think what we're realizing, it just doesn't work that way. And so I think going that extra mile, because in many ways what you're doing, Joe, is you're teaching, right? You're educating, you're kind of preparing the path. The fact that you wait 5 years for an entrepreneur to have an investor-ready business is incredible. And I'm assuming you handhold them the entire way, right?
We do our best. So there's this piece that's clear to us. You have many more opportunities to fail smart and fail often in other markets than you do here.
Truth.
There's also an abundance mindset where it's like, oh, your business didn't work, just come home and you'll be fine. Here it's like you already started your side hustle, you're trying to keep your main business, and then there's a death in the family or someone's in hospital and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So we need more of that, as we're not there because everyone has had to struggle so much in many ways
just to survive.
Just to survive. The hand-holding we do, and I'm also grateful for everyone else in the market who does hand-holding. We're not the only ones. That piece of what do you need to do to figure out your unit economics? We want to back you, but we just looked at your numbers and they're not making sense to us. We just looked at your legal and tax in our due diligence, and we seem to be the first. And whichever accountant and auditor you're working with, you need to cease and desist. and most people would walk away. Yeah. Or at times, people don't even have the resources to do all of that. Now, the ability to then find a legal team that will sit down with an entrepreneur and say, so we did legal and tax DD. These are all the mistakes. We're going to stay with you as you fix them, and you can check in with us, is rare. But someone has to foot that bill. And we're happy to. Yeah. And kudos to the ecosystem that also makes it possible. I think another entrepreneur that I've been so impressed with this month, it's actually funny enough, another Linda at a company called Akira Chicks.
Okay.
And 5 years ago, they were working on really how do you get more women in tech. Their graduation rate was at 30%. And I looked at it and I was like, honestly, I see what you're trying to do, but then 30% graduation placement and the cost, it's not going to work out. We can't come in now, but if you're ever in a better place, please get in touch with us. And actually that one, we did not go further than that. Over the last 5 years, they've rethought their model. They've increased not only placements in the high 80s, but retention after 2 or 3 years in tech, which is so hard to have people stay, to over 80%. And you look at the increase in incomes and it's phenomenal.
That's real impact. That's real change. Wow. So I think we keep asking this question. I understand that it's a difficult, it's a nuanced question. But from your perspective, seeing all these women, knowing the ecosystem well, both from the capital allocation and then the entrepreneurs, what do you think some of the underlying issues are that make it so difficult for women to access capital on the African continent? I just have to ask.
I know. It's a good question and one that we should keep on asking. I think, one, globally, women have a hard time accessing capital. True. Let's just start with that. It's harder here.
Our 2% number.
Yes. And then you bring it to Africa and, okay. So there are a number of things. And it's both sides. There's both things that investors need to rethink, and there are also things that entrepreneurs need to rethink. I think for a long time, this conversation gets mixed up in who's to blame. And I'd love it if we could move beyond the blame game. I remember I got a scholarship to study in the US. And when I wrote my first, I think, application for a fellowship program, my dean looked at me and he was like, oh my goodness, you're writing. Simply because the way I had been taught how to write was not to take credit, always discuss it as we did this, we achieved this, community this.
Yes.
And I was in the US, I needed to show my agency and I needed to shine. I think we went through 3 months. Every week he'd meet with me and we'd have a different writing assignment. And he would redline it and be like, it's still rubbish.
Not we, I.
Yes. but and I would cry. And I felt like I was being ripped apart in terms of what my values are, what I believed I should be communicating versus what I needed to do, and how to embrace both of them. That level of hand-holding and accompaniment is something that's needed. They're just things we need to unlearn to bring out our best self. And on the entrepreneur side, and since I've been both on the entrepreneur side and the investor side, there's also that piece of being adaptive. How do I need to change? Whatever got me here is not going to get me to the next place. So what do I need to do in this next place? Coupled with what are all the survival things that got me here that are so deep in my understanding of self and my life tactics that are the ones that will hold me back. And those are hard conversations. And also finding someone, that community that I began with at the beginning,
yes,
that will sit with you. So that's that personal development side. I think the room for people to try and iterate, and keep going. And the encouragement. We keep on hearing these stories about how Jeff Bezos was doing his 80th pitch before he got his first dollar, and yet the stories that are always shared in the media is like instant success story. Yes. No one tells you the back. So someone has been fundraising for like 1 year and gotten zero, and they're like, this is never going to happen. Everyone's like, you should move on. So there's that piece of how do we create an ecosystem that works better for entrepreneurs to survive with the resilience, help them improve those ideas so that they can do it better. And definitely on the investor side, what does it take to have investment committees and decision makers who I think ideally have been entrepreneurs?
Yes, it matters.
And know what it is to wake up in the middle of the night and say, I have runway for 1.5 months and I need to figure this out. And also have investment managers and professionals who are deeply rooted in this space. The harder conversation on the investment side we need to have is, before you start a fund, that investment thesis, is it being driven by you, or is it all the things you had to change and conform to appease an LP?
Yes.
Because you have people turning up with, I want a company that does X, Y, Z, this. Often what ends up happening is, one, deep down, you know, it doesn't reflect what's on the ground. But then you're also like, I couldn't have raised money if I didn't pitch it this way. But then you're stuck with a mandate that makes it not work.
It's impossible to deploy that capital.
Exactly. Now, stats out there are that women are more likely to be conservative in their estimates. Women are more likely to be more honest about what they cannot achieve. When you start as an investment manager with that mandate that is already, I don't know where, you're more likely to get wonderful male entrepreneurs who are like, yeah, that I can do. Totally. You want a hockey stick? Yeah, I'll give you that. And then you meet a lot of female entrepreneurs who are like, these are numbers. I don't see how it's working. So there are multiple areas that we need to fix. And I think that piece of everyone has a role. Every stakeholder can move this forward. I feel truly fortunate that in raising this fund, I got a blank slate that was understand the market and design the parameters.
Oh, that is, what a privilege.
Absolute privilege.
What a privilege, Jo.
Absolute privilege. So I'll be clear about that. But then that part needs to be fixed too.
Beautiful answer. You can hear my silence as I'm saying, aha, aha, aha. No, and so I think what we're saying is that we need to design a system and a structure that deploys capital in a way that works and understands also some of the cultural dynamics that you're talking about, because it's going to be different in every single place. So thank you. Thank you for that answer. I think if I was an entrepreneur listening to you, you know, and sitting in that coveted seat as a capital allocator, then I would be asking, what metrics determine investability? And that's not an easy question.
Yeah, but it's a hard one.
Yeah.
But it's also the biggest one for us is actually the character of the entrepreneur.
Huh. I wouldn't have. That's
right?
Not. Yeah, that's not the first thing that would have come to mind. So I'm like, okay.
So there are tons of ideas out there. Many. Bringing an idea to life and seeing it through, particularly in this market, is highly dependent on the team and the individual. You can have the best idea. It can go nowhere. You can have an idea that has potential, and with the right entrepreneur and the right team, they can bring it to life. At this stage, actually, probably for the first 10 to 15 years. So there's also like understanding a startup in our market is not a startup 2 years, you're flipping it or you're going public.
Yes.
No, most startups are 10, 15 years. That's an entrepreneur who has the character and the resilience to consistently make good decisions. And good decisions for us is everything from how you're thinking about your team. We have a zero tolerance for corruption. How you're thinking about the feedback you're getting from the market and adjusting your product. How you're thinking about your runway. How you're willing to make hard decisions. How you're also willing to let your investors know when you need help. So there's another cultural one here whereby from the sample size I have had, granted it's not everyone, based on our education system and based on the values we have, at times as an African entrepreneur, you might try and solve and solve and solve. And the person who gave you money, there's a power dynamic where you don't really want to tell them when things are going bad.
Yeah, you're so right.
There's a shame, there's a guilt. And it's not that people don't want to be honest. It's just that somehow in our schooling, where it's like,
No, because you'd get spanked.
Exactly.
I mean, everywhere else, it would be domestic violence. Let's just say it as it is. Right?
Yes, you solve.
So you're
solve.
inherently fearful as an individual for mistakes. Whereas in other markets, and I know even in the US, actually, the more mistakes, as long as you could explain the rationale as to why you made that decision, especially for me being a trader. I mean, no crystal ball, you're not going to get it right.
Yes.
But you would be rewarded for actually taking that risk. And what I hear you saying is that it's the complete opposite here.
Yes. We need more safe spaces, and people need to know. So again, what I'd love an entrepreneur to hear is that have full disclosure.
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth, even if it's hard. And once you have an investor at the table, they're already in. Like that's when they're the first people you want to run to and be, sorry, this is not looking the way I thought it was going to look. We need to change this. What it allows is for everyone to, one, have the trust, but also course correct early on, rather than course correcting at the end and being like, oh, we could not have solved this the way it is now. I wish we had known. The flip side is also for that investor, them going back to their IC and saying, sorry to blindside you with this, they're also losing trust on that end. But if they can discuss it earlier on, you can actually access more support throughout the chain. Yeah. So character. And then...
It makes sense now.
Yeah. After that, yes, the product market fit. And does this individual either know what they're working with, or are they surrounding themselves with a team that can help them figure it out? Because a lot is going to change. The dynamic of being the singular CEO who makes all the decisions is tricky. And you do need systems to hold you accountable. And we're also dealing in markets where so much changes so quickly.
Yeah.
That whichever base plan you had, it's going to evolve. Yeah. The piece on profitability, market size, and all of those we dive into the numbers. We've definitely been told that our financial and market due diligence can cause heartburn. And our legal and tax.
Thorough. Yeah.
We want to be thorough. Both, and in that process, we hope that by being thorough, we're actually providing you with something that will help you figure out what's working with my business and what's not working. And also, if there's a place where we can be like, this is the issue, we can see where we can solve it. Let's do it together. Or there's someone else who's interested in your company. We've already done all the base work to make it faster for them. You feel free to share what we've already shared with you. So it works both ways. Yeah.
No. Agree, and I hear you. So with all this work that you're doing, and I think one of the reasons that I really wanted you to come on the podcast is just, one, I know your heart and your passion and your intent for the work that you do. And the unconventional way that you're going about resolving a lot of issues in terms of deploying capital. I ask this question every time we have a guest on this podcast, and it is, what can our doers-defined community do to support you on this specific mission?
It's a good one. One clear one is the entrepreneurs we're engaging are brilliant people, and they need advisors. They need advisors who've got very specific knowledge about different elements of what they're doing.
So sector experts.
Yes. That piece of making yourself available and saying, you know what, this is an individual who I think has potential. I am going to consistently commit this time to get them through. And it needs to be long term. It's not that advisor where it's like once a quarter and
roll in.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That I think there's also a tricky part where we do have a dynamic where a lot of advisors do want to be remunerated. And I'm like, yes, your skill set should be recognized. But I'm hoping some people might want to have both pro bono and market corner.
Yeah.
Because the entities that are more likely to remunerate an advisor are more established, have better access to funding, and a good number of them also are expatriate-led.
Yes.
The local entrepreneur doesn't have that network and doesn't even know where to begin. So this gap continues to grow. And one clear thing is just make a commitment that over the next 6 months, maybe two entities that you come across looking at different impact portfolios that you're just like, that person is in my space and I love what they're doing. Based on my capacity, I can do an hour a month, but I'm going to be consistent. Not asking you to go out of your way, any place that feels like this is beyond me, but that knowledge source is something that's lacking and that we need to build.
Joe, that's a call to action for myself as well, because I know that's why you're smiling at me. And I think also to our entire community. So all my friends watching this, colleagues, acquaintances, we cannot complain about this ecosystem if we're not willing to commit our time. Well said. I hear you. I hear you, especially for myself in the energy space.
Absolutely. And I think for all of us who've gotten here, we can probably think through the many people who've done so much pro bono endlessly for us to get us here.
Yeah.
We didn't pay for all of it.
They believed in us even before we believed in ourselves.
Exactly. And if any of those people were to charge us, we'd not have gotten here. But they also figured out how to do it in a way, because everyone has responsibilities, that was not overextending them, but incredibly meaningful. Of course, there's a side where that piece of the entrepreneur also needs to have their stuff together. So it's like, I have 30 minutes today and it's a powerful 30 minutes. And if they're not there, it's fine. They're not there. They're not a good fit. But I think we could do more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a powerful ask and a really, really good one. Because I think as you explained to me the journey that you walk, you realize, yeah, that's a critical element that's actually missing within our ecosystem. And it's not that we don't have people. It's just that we don't put in the time. So you're doing all this incredible work. You've always done incredible work. I mean, from the time I even knew you from Starting Block. How will you know you have succeeded in this mission? And how do you measure it, you know?
By the way, there are going to be successes and failures. I just hope the successes are more than failures.
True.
I just want to be clear about it as a journey. So one of the ways, basically, and I love my team. I have a phenomenal team in-house of incredible women who bring this gather vision to life. One of the things we measure is just how from the time we invested to where we are, 6 months in, 1 year in, what is the increase in income? And can we get it to be above 5x?
Wow. People are looking for 2x.
I know.
Here you
are.
Oh
my goodness. That might need a different session with all the excitement around 2x.
Yeah.
But think about where your parents grew up. Or just any rural environment. What is 2x going to do for you?
You're holding not just yourself, your family, you have relatives, you have the community, and we forget.
But it's also 2x. That's what? Moving from, 300 Kenya shillings to 600 Kenya shillings per day. It's if you're thinking international, like $2 to $4. It's not, you're not going to take your kids to school with that. You're not going to gain any asset. It's just enough to sustain you. And trickily enough, it is the challenge that has come all the way from the colonial era, where it's like we give them jobs. Think if there's a better way for everyone who has cultivated coffee, tea, pyrethrum, and any of the things we export. If there was a way of them just not only surviving from that, but having significant increases in their income. And what would it take? So that basis, and granted, it's not going to be a win. Every entity is going to be above 5x when we start.
Yeah.
But then we put a focus on we went in with the thesis that it's supposed to be here. If it's not, why isn't it? And what should we change about this? The other one we track is, okay, what's a pipeline? What's a pathway really to assets? So yes, your income is increasing, but then we'll have hard conversations with companies around, okay, what are the assets? How do we get the assets? We actually earmark chunks of our money, and we're happy to even think about it in terms of what is our share in the company to go towards what creates assets. And yes, I've discussed smallholder farmers. We have another company that's working with female waste pickers in landfills called Cubic in Ethiopia.
Wow.
And taking that plastic waste and converting it into bricks, construction bricks that can be used to build houses. The Ethiopian goal is, what would happen if replacing concrete, these plastic bricks can then be used to build homes or community centers or small businesses and kiosks for these women who are waste pickers and moving out of that. A demographic that's completely ignored. And that piece of thinking through and that journey of this is how far we've gone, what do we need to do next is a key one. So we measure it, income, assets. The climate piece is absolutely important for us because as with the recent floods here, and now we have the droughts in Southern Africa, we have current floods in West Africa. We, as a continent, generate the least emissions, but then we also feel the most impact. How do we prepare for that world? What are the things that make us more resilient? So whether it's this idea of, we don't know what to do with the landfills. Can we repurpose that into actually a marketable resource that ends up competing with scarce virgin materials that go into construction? Or how do we think about the agricultural piece and energy for women? Or better yet, there are all these things, but that climate piece, if we miss that, then we're also only thinking about short-term gains.
Yes.
So, and that's harder to measure. We also think about team in terms of what would success look like? Back to that question. Yes, the stakeholders, you have incomes, and ideally you have stock ownership, and if they're assets, you have assets. At the team level, you have really gender diverse teams, and you have women just ascending and living their best lives. At the investor level, we're being more accountable and moving beyond 2x.
I love that.
I think that
Yeah, I love that. It's ambitious. But I wouldn't expect anything less of you.
Oh,
Yeah. No, just great work. Just wishing you all the success with everything that you're doing. And
Thank
I'm
you.
right behind you. Yeah. In supporting this mission.
Thank you.
I said earlier, you're just such an incredible human, just inside and out. And so I'm actually curious. I don't know where you draw your inspiration from.
Ooh. There are multiple threads. The first one, I was probably around 9 or 10. My dad is Kenyan, my mom is Ugandan. Mm-hmm. And at that point, there's a lot of rebel fighting in Uganda. And we went to visit my dear grandmother. And when we got to her home, she was alive first, but the entire home was riddled with bullets. Mm. And she explained how the rebels came in and took the cattle. Mm. But before they did that, they usually, unfortunately, killed the people in the homestead. The only reason why she survived is my youngest aunt hoisted her into the ceiling board. And when they do the first round where they fire around the home, and then there's the second round where they walk in. But when they got to the door, one of the rebels said, "Not this house. They took me to school."
Oh my God.
So powerful. So I was livid that my dear grandmother and I went through this after taking this person she knew, and she could tell from their voice who it was, to school. And that sense of like, no good deed goes unpunished. Like, how could it end up this way? And my grandmother looked at me with such disappointment. I think I can still see her face. And she very kindly, yet sternly, told me, it's such privilege that I can question the choices these young boys, they were child soldiers, made, because I do not know what it is to be so hungry that your only option is to steal, and to steal from people who love you.
That's so powerful.
And she had the wherewithal of understanding her privilege, that even as much as she might have helped this child soldier go to school, she was still in a place of privilege then, right? She wasn't dealt his cards. And so that piece of always knowing my privilege and being humble about it is something I try to hold on to. The second that has been really transformative for me was my parents, entrepreneurial, started a side hustle. I don't remember the exact year, but the Pope was visiting Kenya and was doing a big crusade at Uhuru Park. And my parents got a kibanda, which is just a small metal shack to sell food. And this was from their savings. They put money aside. And everyone's like, this is going to be amazing. They're going to be tens of thousands of people. It's just a great investment, moneymaker. Yeah. So there were 6 kibandas. No one discussed.
And you might need to explain what a kibanda is.
So a kibanda, think of a roadside metal shack with iron sheeting on the top. And
a stall.
Yes. A stall and iron sheeting on the side. But ours was really fancy. We had very nice plates. My parents had really done the interior. It was beautiful. Yeah. They put love, thought, and were like, our product differentiator is well-served food. Like you would feel pride and dignity getting your food from here. So during my school holidays, I was 13. I had just finished primary school. I and there's this large gap between when you finish Kenya primary school and go to high school. I would do everything from 5 a.m. getting vegetables from the market to opening up the place to we had a chef and 2 servers, and to balancing the books in the evening to pay them. I learned a lot about managing a business as a micro business. I also learned the pain of being in a saturated market with no product differentiation and a small capture size. So I began walking around the nearby buildings and began the very earliest versions of Uber delivery. So in the morning, I'd go to the nearby offices and collect food orders and deliver in the afternoon.
Okay.
And it was the hardest I've ever worked, really, hardest I've ever worked in my life. For the least amount of money. My parents were always so happy when they looked at the earnings when I was on holiday, like, this business is working. I was like, that's because your number one employee is unemployed. It's not getting any payment here.
Yeah.
And
pro bono work.
Pro bono. And it's doing, but it was that insight, for me, it was also, you can do the hardest work. You can be so committed. But at times there's certain macro dynamics that just don't set you up for success. The rest of my life, I have not put in as much energy as I put in during that time. Yet the return for my efforts has been infinitely higher than if I tried to run that kibanda for multiple years.
Oh, Jo.
Oh.
One, I'm so honored to know you. So ladies and gentlemen, these are the people that I am surrounded with. Just inspiration galore. So thank you for coming on the Doers Defined podcast, teaching us. I learned so much from you, learning from you. And I know a lot of other people will hear you and understand what needs to be done. We hear your call to action. And we thank you just for the dedication, for the time, for doing the difficult work. You are actually on the front line. And so never hesitate to reach out to us, our community, myself included, and just say, I think you guys can pull up here. So thank you so much, Jo.
Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity. And thank you for what you're doing, because we need more of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ideas that we're all working with, the opportunities that we're all seeing, and the promise we all believe are at times not that apparent to others. I think this space you've created for us to just share and learn and talk is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the why. That's the why. Thank you, Jo.